Hey everybody, it's Bergeron and we're going to do a real simple, easy still life, and I invite you to follow along. Get out your stuff and we're going to make this really easy for you. Today we're going to do a simple still life. Here's a picture of it. It's a small blue teapot, 2 lemons and 3 oranges on a plate. All right, one of the lemons is in front of the plate. Real simple, easy composition. And I'm going to make this really quick and easy for you. Should be painless. So what you're going to need is, you're going to need a sketchbook, because we're going to do a thumbnail or two. You're going to need a piece of paper. This is watercolor paper, Canson 140-pound watercolor paper that I draw and paint on all the time, but this is watercolor paper. I'm going to use a 1/2-inch flat watercolor brush, my normal watercolor palette, and some water. That's all you're going to need. Sketchbook and a pencil. All right, so let's have a look at the photo there. All right, so we're going to do a couple of thumbnails, and I always invite you to do thumbnails before you start doing your drawing. These are thumbnails that I did in a previous for a previous video. But remember this, FTE, focus, thumbnail, edit. All right? Focus on a particular set of objects, do some thumbnails, edit them, redo the thumbnails if you have to, and re-edit them. All right? So I'm going to draw this, or I should say I'm going to paint this painting in landscape format. In other words, I'm going to have it so that the page is wide instead of tall. Obviously, this particular still life fits better in that. We'll show you another photo of it. So you see everything's fairly low. If this was a taller still life, say one that had wine bottles in it or flowers, you would probably turn it the other way so that it was in portrait mode, or portrait style, I guess I should say. All right? Okay, so let's have a look at this. So if you remember before, we talked about splitting our page up into thirds, the rule of thirds. All right? The rule of thirds says that I should have something interesting on these intersection points. So I'm going to look at this, this plate. I'm going to make it so I'm looking a little bit further down on it than I might normally be. And I'm going to have my teapot. It's a little squatty kind of a teapot, and top is sort of rectangular like this, and then it's got a spout that comes out, goes across here like this, and it's got a lid on a bit of an angle like this. Maybe move this over a little bit, kind of a rounded lid. And then on here we have a couple of oranges, a couple that cover each other up a little bit, and then behind that we have a lemon, and you can tell it's a lemon because it's yellow, and in front of this plate we have another lemon. All right, from this particular view I can really only see part of this teapot handle, so I'm not going to make it very visible. All right, that's pretty much what it is that I'm going for. So I might not have to edit this, but certainly I'm going to use this thumbnail to say where it is I'm coming from. You'll see I have this teapot on the third. I have the plate sort of on the 2 intersection points, and I have the teapot. This is a pretty interesting negative space around here. I kind of like this negative space here. And this is a pretty interesting negative space here. We're going to have our table go across here, pretty much right around where that line is on the background of the we're going to make the table go across here, pretty much where the background line is of that whiteboard in the back there. So that should work out all right. So now we need to transfer this onto, we're going to transfer our little sketch onto our watercolor paper. And if you remember before, what we did was we basically just took this and split this up into thirds. So you can just draw a thin line with your pencil across there and draw another third down here and another third down here. And this is just to give you a rough estimation about where it is you're going to lay these things out. So on my sketch, my plate sort of comes around to here. I'm going to draw it as an ellipse, right? And in front of this is a lemon, and this particular lemon is a little bit bulky, I guess I would call it. It's a little bit bigger than that, maybe. My lemon is maybe about that big. All right. I'm going to take my eraser and I'm going to erase that first smaller lemon that I had on there. And now I have in the background here, I have an orange that is about there. And I have an orange in front of it, which is about here. And I have another orange here. And then I have another lemon that's sort of behind that one, and it comes to a bit of a point there like that. All right, and that's about it. And then behind all of this, if I refer to my sketch here, I have the teapot sort of comes out like this, back like this, and then the handle for this teapot, can't see very much of it from this particular angle. And then this is rounded, so I'm going to put that in rounded. Has a bit of an angle like this and sort of a top like that. Then we have a spout. The spout's on a bit of a weird angle for this particular teapot. It kind of comes out like this. Something like that. There we go. I think that's about what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take out all of my 1/3 lines now. All right. So every line that I put where the intersection points are, I'm going to take all of those out. And I want you to remember that I don't really care about leaving my pencil lines in. Some people don't like their pencil lines on there. Some people don't like their pencil lines at all on their watercolor, so they will erase all the pencil lines. I am not that guy. I leave the pencil lines in. All right, so that's pretty good. I think this is a little bit of a mess up here and not really what it is that I'm going for. So I'm going to make this a little bit more of a sort of a button and come down like that a little bit. Yeah, that's more of what it is that I'm going for. And that's maybe a little bit too dark. So I'm going to maybe lighten some of those up, those pencil lines up a little bit. And this handle is a bit of a mess, so I'm going to take that off. Just put this back on slightly like this. All right. And we got a bit of a mess going on here too, so just sort of straighten that out a little bit, sort of like that. I think that'll work. And take this line off the inside of here. So if you've seen what I did, I just broke it down into real basic, easy shapes to deal with. And now I'm going to take out the lines that I don't want to show after I get done this. So, you know, maybe there's a few too many lines there. I'm going to take some of those out. Take this out. And remember, this is a lemon. They have a little bit of a nipple on the end there where it joins onto the tree. And I'll take my handy dandy little brush and do that. And if I go back to my drawing here, I'll see that I have my tabletop coming right through like this. All right, just like that. Okay, so we're going to paint this. So you can take your thumbnail sketch and put it away. You don't need it anymore. And we'll have another look at the photo of the still life so that we can see what it is that we're painting here. Okay, so once again, I have my water out my 1/2 inch flat watercolor brush, my paint, and my paper that's gridded out to 8 by 10, and I have my drawing on there now. I also have my hair dryer so that I can get this dried up and move along fairly quickly. I'm going to, today I'm going to make this teapot the actual blue that it is, and I'm going to make the oranges orange and obviously the lemons yellow. So I'm thinking, you know, I can change anything that I want on my painting. Obviously I should probably think about what it is before I start. And so what I think is I'm going to leave these oranges orange, lemons yellow, teapot blue. So I got to think about what's the contrast, and you know, if we plan ahead, then we can really do whatever it is that we want to do. So the blue will contrast with the orange of the oranges, because blue is the contrast to orange and orange is the contrast to blue. The lemons, of course, are yellow. Blue is pretty close to purple, so I could put a little bit of purple into this blue, and that would be a good contrast with this. So what should I do with the foreground, the background, and the plate? So I want this particular painting to have some light, lively colors to it. So I'm going to make my background be sienna, and I'm going to make the foreground probably be purpley Payne's gray. But we'll get to that in a minute. So let's do the background, the sienna. So let's just take our brush really, really wet, and we're going to wet this entire area around where the teapot is. And keep in mind that you know, you want to have, we're working wet on wet, so we're going to make the page really wet. I'm going to wet the left side first, and then I'm going to wet the right hand side here, and I'm going to go around the teapot fairly delicately, around where the handle would be. I'm going to go around there fairly delicately also, and I'm just going to keep wetting this until I get the page as wet as I need it to be. All right, like this. That's pretty wet. You can see the water right on the, puddling up right on the page. So that's how wet I want to be. All right, so I'm going to take my tissue here and I'm going to clean up my blue. All right. Now, normally I wouldn't do that. And actually, I'm not going to do that this time. I'm going to show you a different method. So I have this really, really wet. I'm going to mix up some sienna here. And I'm going to go for a fairly thick, a fairly saturated paint. So not much water, but quite a bit of pigment. And I have quite a bit of water on the page. All right. So this would be still considered wet on wet. And I'm going to put quite a bit of pigment on here. All right, like this. Make sure it's only going where I have it wet. And then I'm going to tip the page. Get some color flowing around there to where I want to go. All right, and you'll see it's only going in the areas that are wet. And I'm going to keep that going. Now I have this area right here in around the handle, and I want it to also have some, this is also going to be background, so I'm going to have it a little bit wet also. And I'm just going to move this around to wherever it is I want this color to be. And remember, with watercolor paper, the color is only going to go, where the page is wet. All right, so a bit of a streak going on there that I'm not happy with. I'm gonna move that around there like that. And I need this to come all the way down to the tabletop. All right, so now I can't work on the tabletop right now because if I wet that area, then this sienna is gonna run into where the tabletop is. But what I can do right now is I can wet the area that I want to be my lemons. All right, so I'm gonna wet that area. And we're gonna work slightly different today than we have in the past. I'm gonna take that, wet that all up. I'm gonna pick up some of this yellow, all right? Get a lot of pigment, not much water, and I'm going to put some yellow into my lemons. And we'll have a look at the picture again so you can see where the lemons are in the photograph. All right, again, I'm leaving my pencil lines in there, making my lemons as round as I want them to be. All right, and I'm going to move the color around both in my lemons and in my background. I'm going to move it back and forth until I get it to where it is that I want it to be. Now I have my oranges to do also here, so I'm going to take this 1/2 inch flat brush and I'm going to paint where these oranges are. All right, and you see my yellow escaped out of where the lemon was and it ran into where the orange is, but that's okay. So I'm going to mix up, again, I'm going to put some water in here with the orange. We're trying to keep this painting very loose, very free. Put some orange in here where this is, some orange in here, and some orange there. And that's where I'm going to stop for right now. All right, so I'm going to get my hair dryer and I'm going to dry this up, and then as soon as you get it dried up, come right back. All right, so I'm back. So I dried that, and then I flipped it over and I dried it from the back because it was fairly wet. So I moved a little bit of this paint around before it was completely dry. So I moved a little bit of this around to cover up some of that yellow that had escaped from the lemon into the orange. I like how this has some darker areas where the paint has dried last. And then there's this little bit of white where I hadn't quite covered it all. It gives it a bit of a highlight for that orange. I'm going to keep going here, and I'm going to do the teapot next. So the teapot is blue, so I'm going to use this blue that I already have right here. And before I get into the teapot too much, I'm going to mix this up. I'm going to make this fairly watery. Now I'm going to take my brush with a lot of water on it, and because I have a little bit of blue on this brush now, I'm just going to go around, outline where it is that I want the blue to be for the teapot, just like that. I'm going to pick up a little bit more water. I'm going to wet all this whole area. Right? I'm not being very delicate about it. I'm just trying to get some water on the page to the area that I want to be just teapot. And you know, if you look at it from the side a little bit, you can see better where if you look on a bit of an angle like this, you'll see where it's wet and where it's not. Now I'm going to get a little bit of water on my brush, pick up my blue, and I'm going to put my blue on here. I'm going to put it on the handle, fairly thick. And I'm going to put it across here. Put quite a bit of pigment into this water that's on the page. And I'm just going to let it flow around there. All right, I'm just going to let it flow in. Pick up a little bit more. This would be considered a wash usually. So a wash is just simply a bunch of water that has some pigment into it. It's very runny, and it sort of allows the artist to move stuff around like this, get stuff going wherever it is that you want it to go to. And I'm probably going to leave it I'm probably going to leave it like that just as I touch the page more. But I'm probably going to leave it just like that. All right, I'm going to just leave it just like that, and I'm not going to do anything to it, the teapot anymore. I might move the water around as it's, the wash around as it's drying to get it to highlight different areas and see what happens from there. But right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to dry this again, and then we're going to come back and we're going to work on the foreground. I'm going to leave this plate area white, all right? The plate in the photograph, I'll put the photograph back up for you again. The plate in the photograph is white. All right, so we're going to leave that white. and my foreground here. We're going to decide upon the color once the blue of this teapot is dry, but I think I'm going to put a little bit more color over here. I think I'm going to make this a little bit darker right around this area and down here. Put a little bit more pigment in there. That's probably pretty good. And then we can move this around as it's drying. All right. So remember, you can kind of keep moving it as long as it's wet. You can keep moving it around. All right. So have a quick dry of that, and then we'll come back and we'll do some more. All right. So I spent about 10 minutes or so getting that all dried up, and the teapot is completely dry. I'm going to take some of my blue here, and I'm just going to put a little bit of blue on here, a little bit across here, just to sort of highlight where the edges are of this. Maybe a little bit of blue around where the lid is, and maybe a little bit more blue on the handle. This is a good way to layer up some paint and get several layers going on in there. And put a little bit of dark blue in here where the spout is. That's probably it. That's probably all I'm going to do. So that's all I'm going to do to the blue, I should say. I'm going to pick that little piece of dirt up out of there. All right, so I'm going to leave it just like that. I really like the way that teapot has turned out, so I'm not going to mess with it anymore. I'm trying to stick to real basic color theory and real basic primary colors in this series. So what it is I want to do right now is I want to put some red in. So I'm going to wet this entire table area. Be careful to leave the oranges. Don't touch the lemons. Don't touch the plate. I'm going to wet everything all the way around here, right up to the bottom of the teapot. And whatever you think is going to be your, see, I got this a little wet, this teapot area right here, a little wet. So I'm going to take my tissue, always have a tissue on hand. I'm going to dry that up. I'm going to pick up the water again and come up fairly close to it, but not touching it. Okay? Remember, you can always take a tissue and you can always dry stuff up with a tissue. I'm going to go around my lemon again. Again, I'm still wetting this. All right, wetting this some more, wetting around the plate, not touching the plate, not touching the lemon. All right, gonna get right down in here close to the teapot, but not touching any of that. All right, so remember the water in watercolor painting, water that you put onto the page will only go where it's wet. So I'm gonna wet this red. I'm going to use my red here. I'm going to put a whole bunch of red in on this side. Right? I'm just going to tap the brush full of paint. Got a lot of pigment in it. I'm going to touch the brush in there. Get a lot of the pigment off the brush and onto the page. Just like this. All right? And then I'm going to just tip it, just like we did before. I'm going to tip it, and the red is going to run where we've wet for the table. You'll see right here it's not wet, so I'm just going to put some, just going to wet that piece of the page. All right, move it back and forth there. Get my pigment to run where I want it to run to. All right, you see I'm not painting the pigment onto the page. I just sort of dropped it in. That's what you'll hear me sometimes talk about, oh, I just dropped that color in. That's what I mean by that. I didn't touch it onto that area. I just wet that part of the page and I let the color run. All right, we're going to put some more pigment on there and a little bit more pigment along there. And we're going to tip this up and just going to run this around. And you'll see this is turning in, this is actually turning out, there's not many of these that I would say I really like, but this one I'm going to say is sort of turning out. I'm glad I chose red for the table area because it's actually turned out pretty good. I'm going to wet this a little bit more along here and run some water into that pigment I just put on there and move some of that pigment around. It's a little bit too red there for me. All right, so a little bit. I'm going to take some of the red off my brush. I put a little bit too much pigment on here, so one way that we fix that is we just touch it with our brush and just move some of that pigment right out of there. So just so it's not quite as, and you'll see that did a pretty good job of it, just so it's not quite as dark red around that orange. All right, that's turned out not too bad. I'm actually kind of happy with that. This one little area right here, I kind of messed up a little bit, but I'm going to just take my tissue and take a little bit of that out of there. Put a little bit more water back on that. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. All right. I'm actually kind of all right with the way that's turned out. That's actually pretty good. For me, you know, my demonstrations don't turn out, you know, 50% of the time. So this is one of the ones that has, and I'm kind of okay with it. So you'll see the little bit of extra blue that I put into here sort of made that pop. The blue by the orange, really, really good contrast. The red on the table has worked out pretty well for me. I'm going to take my brush. I'm going to dry my brush off a little bit. I'm going to suck some of this color out of here because that's a pretty intense little spot there. Suck some of this out of here. And maybe take a little bit of that out of there, and that's pretty good. So yeah, if you followed along, I hope you did follow along, and I hope you paused it and gave yourself a chance to catch up and do some of this. Get your hair dryer out, dry this. I'd love to hear from you. If you have a question or a comment, please post it in the comment section. If you learned anything from this video, please click liked. And if you're not currently a subscriber, please subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate everybody that asks me a question or gives me a like, or anybody who subscribes. I really, really do appreciate it. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what other kind of still lifes or what other kind of things that you would really like me to do a demonstration of. Please let me hear from you. I'll post a picture of this at the end of the video of what this looks like dried up. Thanks a lot for checking me out. We'll see you again next time. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with the way that this has turned out. Like I said before, lots of my demonstrations never really turn out, and this one is not too bad. For me anyways. I would say I would probably frame it, you know, something like that. So you have a 1/3 up around the top where the orange is, 1/3 where the oranges and the lemon are in the middle, 1/3 with the one lemon in the bottom. I really kind of like this negative space around here, and this negative space around here. It's for me, it's turned out really well. I'm really happy with it.